We are now traveling back to the last great ice age about 25,000 years ago. At that time, ordinary people were very similar to you. They were gently and continuously pushed along on cold nights, which would take away the breath in your lungs and the life of your limbs. Before we embark on this quiet journey to the ancient fortress of winter, let's drift together to a world composed of mammoth-bound shelters, piles of embers, and the soft, endless rhythm of survival under the frozen sky. Imagine you stand at the edge of a huge open plain, with the sun setting behind distance, no minus-capped mountains and icebergs. The wind came before dark, carrying a bone-minus chilling coldness that pierced through every crack of your clothes and exposed every piece of your skin. At this very moment, you are neither a hero nor a legendary figure. You are just another person, one of a small group of people scattered in this frozen world. Your only task tonight is the same as every night: stay warm enough to wake up again. The scenery around you stretches endlessly. The snow-capped peaks were broken by exposed black stones, and short trees clung tightly to the sheltered valley. There was nothing else but the wind and the vastness. The moon rose pale from afar, casting a long shadow that changed with a gust of wind. Your shelter is nearby, half of which is buried in a shallow depression. You and your team have strengthened it for many seasons. This frame is made of the huge bones of mammoths. The curved ribs arched up above the head like the framework of an ancient cathedral, bound together with tendons and covered with thick layers of animal skins. Snow was deliberately piled up around the base, and the gaps in the ceiling blocked the fiercest wind. The interior space was dim and enclosed, filled with the smell of smoke, corpses and the faint musk of old fur. There is still work to be done before night falls completely. You move slowly on the snow-covered ground, looking for anything that might catch fire. Prying out twisted roots from frozen soil, breaking dead branches from low bushes, and even drying animal manure is scarce. Your hands are wrapped in leather strips, but the cold can still find them. Every time you clench or twist your fingers, they hurt a lot. The others in your group are doing the same thing, moving in a quiet mode on this land and collecting what they could gather before dark made work impossible. No one talked much. Breathing is too precious. Don't waste it on words that will only be carried away by the wind. When you dragged a handful of fragile wooden twisted tree roots back to the shelter, the light had already faded into a thin gray line on the horizon. The entrance to your home is very low. You have to squat down, almost crawl to pass through the narrow hole. Inside, the fire had already begun. Others coaxed out a small flame from yesterday's embers and carefully fed it with dry and ossen twigs until it caught and grew. The smoke slowly rose towards the small ventilation openings at the top of the building, although most of it lingered inside, stinging your eyes and covering your throat. You're already used to it. You hardly notice it. Place the electric wood near the fire, close enough to dry, but not too close, or it will catch fire. It feels good to be hot on your face, but the cold still presses on your back. It reminds us that the warmth here is always partial and always controversial. Your clothes are layered. The soft leather adheres closely to your skin, followed by the inner fur for warmth, and then another layer of thicker leather on the outside to shield from the wind. This should be enough, but never enough. The animal skin gets damp due to your breathing, the melting snow and the sweat from collecting wood. Tonight, they will slowly dry by the fire, giving off a faint steam, and the air will be filled with the damp smell of animal skin. You are sitting on a pile of furs behind the shelter. The place you designated for sleeping has been worn smooth by countless nights. A child, perhaps yours, perhaps your sister's, curls up beside you seeking warmth, their tiny bodies trembling slightly beneath their fur. You put your arms around them. Their heat and yours mix together, and a small exchange made both of you a little warmer. Dinner is ready. An elderly woman was guarding a flat stone by the stove, roasting the fat meat left over from hunting yesterday. This smell is strong and greasy. It's not entirely unpleasant, but that kind of headiness in your throat. Beside the meat, the roots are softened in a shallow bowl of hot water, and their pale flesh becomes soft and fibrous. When the food is ready, It will be distributed quietly and efficiently. Still hot and a little bitter. Chew slowly and mechanically. The meat is very tough and smoky, and it requires patient work to decompose. The roots have a smell of earth and charcoal. This is not an enjoyable meal. It's just fuel, nothing more. It's the calorie that keeps your body warm for a long time to come. You can feel the fat settling in your stomach, a heavy presence, and your body will gradually convert it into heat. This will never be enough. You always feel a persistent sense of low hunger, a feeling that your body is consuming reserves that cannot be fully replenished. Around you, others are also eating in the same quiet way. There is very little conversation. A few soft comments, a question about tomorrow's plan, and a gentle guidance for the child. This emotion is not serious, but it is very serious. Everyone knows what is needed tonight. With the last ray of light vanished outside, someone moved over to close the entrance more thoroughly, pulling a heavy piece of leather through the opening and pressing it down with a stone. The cold air that has been seeping in has been reduced to a trickle, although it will never completely stop. Is now at the center of everything. It crackled gently, its light dancing on the curved bones above its head and casting changing patterns on the leather wall. Tonight someone, a young man of about 20 years old, was entrusted with the responsibility of putting out the fire. He sat by the fire, feeding them carefully, watching the wood burn and making sure the children were alive. This is not a charming character. It requires continuous attention, a meditative alertness throughout the night. If the fire goes out, the cold will fully enter. If it burns too fast, the wood will run out before dawn. Under the pull of fatigue and sleep, this balance must be maintained hour after hour. For a while, his face was illuminated by the flames. His eyes were half-minus closed but still alert, though you didn't say it out. It might be your turn tomorrow night. This role is taken on in rotation by those who are old enough, and it is a shared burden that no one can escape. The warmth of the fire can only end here. If you sit too close, your face will get hot and your back will get cold. If you leave, the chill will seep into your bones within minutes. You find a spot somewhere in between, close enough to feel the heat in your hands and face, and far enough for the smoke not to choke you. The child beside you moved a little, snuggling deeper into your side. You adjusted your leather coat to cover them more completely. The wind is starting to blow. You can hear it moving on an open plain. A deep and steady groan seemed to be everywhere. It brushed against the hidden walls from small crevices, whistled gently through the ventilation opening at the top. This sound remains consistent with a strange sense of soothing, a rhythm full of silence. Occasionally, you will hear other sounds. The cracks in the ice in the distance are moving, the faint cries of some animals moving in the darkness, and the soft creaking of the snow under its own weight. You listen without any reaction, categorize the sounds and assess whether there are any that require attention. They never do. The night outside has its own world, a world beyond your control. And don't try to enter. Your eyelids have become thicker, the weight of the child pressing on you, and a long day's work minus all of these pull you to sleep. But the sleep here is not the kind of peaceful forgetting you might imagine. It is fragmented, interrupted by the cold, by the sounds outside, and by the instinct to check if the fire is still burning. You floated for a while, neither fully awake or fully asleep. In this space her thoughts wander back to the hunt 3 days ago, looking forward to tomorrow's mission. The side turns into as any minus-formed image, which might be a memory or a dream. You see that people's faces are no longer here, their features have been blurred by time. You will feel the warmth of the summer that won't return for months. You woke up a little, only noticing that the fire was still burning and the child was still breathing gently beside you. Close your eyes again and let the darkness take you away. The night still goes on. Hour after hour passed, not measured by any clock, but by the slow consumption of wood, the gradual cooling of air, and the changes in sleeping body positions. Someone coughed softly. Some people are still muttering to themselves in their sleep. The firefighters added another piece of wood. The flames rose briefly and then stabilized. Your body will have a slight pain, your buttocks will be pressed against the hard ground, your shoulders will be stiff from maintaining one posture, and your joints will still be very cold despite having layer upon layer of fur. You moved slightly, trying to relieve your discomfort without being fully awake. The child moved, sobbed softly, and then sat down again. You draw them closer and share your warmth. At some point in the dead of night, you will be more alert. The fire had turned into a bed of coal emitting reddened orange light, but less light than before. The firefighter was still awake. His face was haggard from exhaustion and his eyes were fixed on the embers. He reached out for another piece of wood, carefully placed it on the coal, and waited for it to bite. You watched this small ceremony with a sense of reverence. At this very moment, his vigilance is the key for you to withstand the cold. The wood slowly caught fire, the flames licking one side and then spreading out. The light rose again, dispelling the darkness. The firefighter nodded to himself. Satisfied, you close your eyes and drift once again. The night outside is the coldest now. A few hours before dawn, the world seems the coldest and the quietest. In the shelter, the corpses huddled together, sharing the heat in the postures they had learned over countless winters. An elderly man was sleeping with his back to the stove, wrapped in the thickest fur. A young mother was taking care of her baby under a pile of animal skins. The baby's voice was very soft and almost inaudible. Two hunters slept together, their breaths synchronized, and their bodies created a shared warm pocket. The firefighters remained awake, kept watch alone at night, and watched the flames with patient eyes. Finally dream of flying through a plain bathed in sunlight. The grass is green and soft, and the air warms your skin. You can see animals in the distance. Reindeer, horses and bison moved slowly on the land. There is no cold, no hunger, no joint pain or sore fingers here. This is a place where your brain creates from the fragments of memories and desires. Temporarily escape the reality of winter. But even in your dreams, you know that's not true. And know that when you wake up, the cold is still there. This fire still needs care. A long work of survival will continue. The morning came very slowly, almost reluctantly. The darkness outside changed from black to gray, and faint light began to seep in through the cracks in the walls. The firefighter's face was pale from exhaustion. He woke up the person on the next shift, calmly said a few words and handed over the responsibility to him. He curled up beside the fire, pulled up a piece of skin to cover himself, and immediately fell asleep. When the shelter began to shake, you woke up completely. Your body is stiff, your mouth is dry, and your eyes have become rough due to smoke and sleep. You sat up slowly, being very careful not to disturb the child who was still curled up beside you. The cold is coming soon. The moment you leave the shared warmth, it finds you wrapped around your shoulders with layers of leather and fur seeping through. You pulled your clothes tight and walked towards the fire. Others were doing the same thing, gathering around the flames to warm their hands, their faces and their spirits. Someone opened the entrance and a fresh cold air rushed in. You can see outside now. The world is covered in white, the sky is light gray, and the scenery is vast and quiet. Another night has passed. You made it through, just as you got through many others. There was no celebration, no sense of victory, only a quiet and firm knowing that you would do it again tonight. The pace of your life and the pattern of your existence are entirely shaped by this cycle. Gather, eat, keep warm, sleep, wake up, survive. This is a life where only necessities remain. Apart from the necessary things, everything is taken away. In this simplification, there is a clarity and a purity of purpose, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. You're here to keep warm. You are here to survive. Everything else is secondary. When everyone began to get ready for the day's work, you looked back at the fire. It burns steadily, being fed by those who do not want it to die. These people understand that their lives depend on this tiny glimmer of light. The cold has always been there, coming from all directions. But so is fire, and so are the people around. In the balance of these two forces, life is sustained. There was a young man named Tucker. He lived in an era when a name was just a simple voice quietly passed from one person to another, and it only had meaning within the small circle of people who knew you. He is not worthy of celebration in any way. Not the strongest hunter, not the wisest elder, nor the most skilled toolmaker. He was just there, showing up in the daily survival work, and that existence was enough. His tribe lived by a river valley, where the water flowed even in winter, forming a thin flow line in the frozen world. The cliffs there provided some shelter for the fiercest winds. Tarka probably went through about 20 winters, but no one has ever calculated it accurately. His face was already where the mine is beaten, and his hands were scarred by the rough work of stone quarrying and processing animal skins. Most nights he sat beside the fire, not because he held any special position, but because he was always the first to get up. When others were still dozing off, he would reignite the embers that had been piled up. This is his contribution. No one notices it, but silence is necessary. His life went on in a pattern that was repeatedly smoothed out. He woke up in the cold darkness before dawn, his breath filled with mist, and carefully walked around the sleeping corpse to the fire pit. The embers were usually still alive, buried under a layer of ashes. He would gently blow on them, coax them back to a visible place, and feed them small twigs until the flames reignited. The wood crackled gently and the light grew brighter and brighter. Others will wake up one after another, finding that warmth is already waiting for them. Fire is the center of everything, the heart that organizes all life around it. Without it, they would just be trembling animals in the dark, waiting for death to come to them. When the fire burns out, Taka will walk out into the gray light before dawn. At this time the world is always silent. The wind has not yet risen, and the sky is pale and vast. He would move himself away from the shelter, stand for a while, and look to the other side of the valley to observe if there were any movements, animals, or signs of danger. Usually there is nothing here except snow, stones, and the black river below. Sometimes he would see his breath suspended in the air, just like a visible ghost slowly dissipating in the cold. Sometimes he would hear the cracking of ice on the distant river, like the sound of bones breaking reverberating in the valley. When he returned to the room, the others were already in a commotion. Food will be distributed. The dried meat slaughtered yesterday might have been a handful of fat or a piece of bone marrow dug out with a wooden tool. Taka ate her share slowly and thoughtfully, feeling that her body had absorbed calories. He is always aware of hunger, a low-minus profile feeling that has never completely vanished, but he has learned not to think about it. Eating is both an actual act and a ritual, marking the beginning of a day and acknowledging that they have endured another night. Every bite was chewed thoroughly without a single waste. The flavors of meat and fat filled his mouth, making his body yearn for abundance. His mornings are oft unspent dealing with stones. He would sit in a best minus that spot at the entrance, with a pile of flint lumps beside him, and then carefully knock off the flint flakes to make tools: a peeling scraper, the tip of a spear, and a blade for cutting meat. This job requires patience and precision. Each strike must be carried out with just the right amount of force to remove the desired thin sheet without breaking the core. Taka is quite proficient in this area. He's not particularly outstanding, but he's very capable. His knife tip is sharp and balanced, and his scraper is practical and durable. Others rely on his work without commenting, just as they rely on fire, refuge, and each other. A good point might mean a successful hunt or starvation, but no one talks about it directly. The sound of stones hitting each other is a constant background rhythm in the shelter, as familiar as breathe it. Taka learned this trade from an old man. That spring the river was swift and the old man fell into the thin ice and died. In the afternoon, if the weather permits, Taka will attend a hunting party. They worked in groups of 3 or 4, tracking their prey in the snow and moving around on this land. Most of the time, they hunt smaller animals, such as Arctic fur, ptarmigan, and if they are lucky, they may occasionally hunt reindeer. Large animals, such as mammoths and bison, require larger groups and more meticulous planning, and these hunts occur less frequently. The tip of which was one of his own stone tips. The spear shaft was straight and smooth, and he was in control of the familiar balance. He had thrown this spear countless times and knew exactly how it would fly and how much force was needed at different distances. Its weight comforted him. This tool had become an extension of his own body. He can read the grain of wood, know whether wrong grain will crack into pieces, and understand its character as others understand their friends. Hunting is not exciting. They walked, observed and waited for a long time, interspersed with brief movements, and usually ended before they were fully registered. You saw that animal, you paused, you threw it out, either hitting it or not. If you hit it, you will track the injured creature until it becomes weak enough. If you miss, pick up the spear and try again. The snow will tell you where the spear has fallen, and you will trudge over to pull it out. Your fingers are already numb from the cold. I have thrown both of these two types of talker many times. He neither indulged in failure nor celebrated success. He merely noticed what had happened and adjusted his approach for the next time. There is no room for pride or shame. There is only attention and adjustment. The scenery they passed through was both beautiful and dangerous. Large areas of white were divided by black stones and dead trees. All around was silent, with only the creaking of snow underfoot and the occasional chirping of birds breaking the silence. When the hunt is successful, the animal will be dealt with at the place where it landed. Tucker assisted in the massacre. His hands made familiar movements, opening the body cavity, removing the organs, separating the flesh from the bones, and scraping the skin clean. The blood was steaming in the cold air, giving off a strong, metallic smell. His hands became numb. Occasionally he would stop, lean against his body to warm them up, and then continue. They took everything they could back to the shelter. Meat trapped in animal skin, if not eaten. These bones can be crushed to make bone marrow or used as tools. Nothing was wasted. Everything has a purpose. Even the intestines can be cleaned to fetch water or store small items. Even sennas can be dried and used as thread, which is stronger and more durable than any plant fiber. Those who return from successful hunting have their own pace. Although they seem slow due to the heavy load, they carry a sense of calm satisfaction. When night falls, they will return to the shelter and the meat will be distributed in a way that everyone knows. The hunters who hunted the prey got the best share, but everyone got something. After working during the day, Tucker helps with other things in the evening. He scraped animal skins with stone tools, and this repetitive action made his arms hurt. He mended torn clothes, threading through the holes in the broken leather and patiently mending them in the firelight. He helped the younger members of the group learn to shape stones, guided their hands and told them where to start. But he hardly needed to think. When working with both hands, his thoughts were wandering, drifting between recollection and observation, without any particular ideas. Sometimes he would think of his mother, who had been dead for several winters and whose fever had swept through the entire group. Sometimes he would think about the textures of different stones, and some stones were better for certain uses. Sometimes he thought of nothing. His consciousness gradually blurred, and he could only feel the warmth of the fire and the movements of his hands. This might be his most peaceful moment. His thoughts have calmed down, leaving only things to do. There is a young woman named Sarah in the group. Sometimes she sits beside him when he is working. They don't talk much. People who are together every day are not used to talking, but having her by one's side gives a kind of comfort, a quiet company that doesn't need words. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the fire, and there would be wordless conversations between them. Perhaps it's an admission or a shared understanding of their lives. Sarah's good at processing plant fibers and weaves them into ropes and nets with quick and reliable movements. She was about 3 winters younger than Tucker. There was a lightness about her that he envied, a tenacity that seemed not to have been weakened by their hard life. When she smiled, it was rare. It changed the atmosphere of the entire shelter and made everyone feel relaxed. Tucker found himself waiting for these smiles. When they appeared, he would keep them as treasures. The winter when Tucker was 20 was particularly hard to endure. The cold came early and lasted late, and the snow fell deeper than in previous years. Herds of mammoths that usually grazed within a day's walk from the valley left the valley driven by some instinct or pattern. The food reserves of this group of people gradually decreased, and the daily hunting became more urgent and necessary. Every morning brings new anxiety, a feeling of chest tightness knowing that the reserves are running out. The children began to look thinner, their eyes became bigger, and the elders became slower to save energy. Taka and 3 others decided to go further than usual, drifting downstream along the frozen river to find a place where the forest was still thick, where they could collect more fuel. They will be away for a few days, perhaps even longer, and they are making careful preparations. They carried dried eaten fat, extra animal skins for warmth, the best tools and weapons. One early morning, when the sky was clear, they left early and walked in a file in the snow, which sometimes reached their knees. This group of people watched them leave in silence. They understood the risks involved and that this journey might mean life or death for each of them. There was no grand farewell, no ceremony, only brief eye contact and wordless communication. Then the travelers turned around. This trip was exhausting. The cold persisted, pressing on them from all directions. As they left the sheltered spot in the valley, the wind grew stronger and stronger. Tucker's face became numb and his fingers stiffened in the handbag. He focused on placing one foot in front of the other, keeping in step with the person in front of him and not thinking about how far they still had to go. His legs were burning hot from straining, and his lungs were aching from breathing in the cold air. Breath was like swallowing a knife. He learned to breathe lightly through his nose, warming the air up a little before it reached his lungs. They crossed an open wilderness where no plants were growing. The frozen marsh had us cracking and groaning under their weight. On the low hills, the wind had blown away all the snow, revealing the black stones beneath. This world is vast and indifferent, a place that doesn't care about their life and death. Taka walked in this open space and realized how insignificant they were and how fragile human life was in the face of the boundless winter. They were just for figures, moving across the boundless white canvas, almost invisible in the snow. In the evening they stopped and made a small fire with the wood they carried with them and any branches they could find nearby. The fire was not enough, it was just enough to warm their hands and cook a small meal. Their sleep was intermittent. Taka curled up beneath his animal skin. Despite the layers of snow, she was still trembling, listening to the sound of the wind and the movement of ice blocks in the distance. He thought of the refuge in the valley, of the grace of fire and the warmth of many people. He felt a strong longing, almost a physical longing. But he didn't complain. None of them did. This is exactly what we need. Talking about discomfort is meaningless and a waste of energy. It's better to spend your energy on endurance. The second night was worse than the first. The temperature dropped so low that their breathing froze on their beards and eyelashes. Tucker felt his body start to stop functioning, sensing the dangerous drowsiness brought by the real cold. He forced himself to stay awake and kept moving his fingers and toes. On the third day they found what they had been expecting. A rock protruding from the ground formed a natural suspension, deep enough to offer true shelter, with a large number of fallen dead trees there. More importantly, they discovered a deep natural depression in the snow at the bottom of the outcrop. This is a kind of cave, formed by the wind hollowing out the space under the falling snow. The 4 of them worked together to improve it. They cut down branches and used them to reinforce the walls, filling them with snow to insulate against heat. They spread animal skins at the entrance to make a door that could be closed. They collected some stones and formed a rough circle around them as a fire pit, so that smoke could escape from a small gap they had left at the top. This work walled them up, their blood began to flow again, and their limbs gradually regained sensation. Taka's hand was in severe pain during the thawing process. A burning sensation brought tears to his eyes, but he was glad because it meant he hadn't lost a single finger due to frostbite. When they were done, they created something that was almost like home. They made a fire in the room and carefully fed it with a large amount of dead wood. For the first time in several days they felt true warmth. The hot air filled the cramped space, reflecting on the snow wall. They sat closely together, their bodies relaxed and their faces flushed red. They cooked the meat, ate it slowly, let the food settle down and let the warmth seep in. Just like being reborn. Just like being resurrected from the dark underground world. Felt his muscles tense. He didn't even know that it was flowing out of his body. That night, Taka slept more soundly than he had in the past few weeks. The wind outside was howling, but the snow wall remained motionless, and the fire kept burning, taking turns to care for it. He didn't dream of anything. It was just a deep blank rest that his body desperately needed. When he woke up, he felt a near-minus satisfied sensation, a rare feeling in his life. The others had woken up and added fire to the fire. The room was warm and bright. Wrench does not refresh you, it does not energize him. For a moment, he forgot where he was and thought he had returned to the great shelter. They stayed in the snow cave for another 5 days, collecting as much firewood as possible and resting in the warmth of the shelter. During this period of time, Taka found himself observing an old hunter named Otto. He seldom spoke, but his appearance aroused people's quiet respect. Otto has a history of about 40 winters and is considered ancient by the standards of their world. His face was covered with wrinkles. His body was scarred by old injuries, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He lived longer than most people. From his behavior, it can be seen that he knew some things that others didn't. He acts frugally, never wasting his movements, and never expending unnecessary energy. One night they were sitting by the fire when Otto began to speak. His voice not loud and not like a formal story, it was just an observation. He talked about other winters he had experienced, about the times when food was scarcer and the entire group vanished into the cold and never returned. He talked about the importance of patience, the importance of not expending energy unnecessarily, and the importance of believing in the patterns that have enabled people to survive for generations to come. His voice, having been through any battles, was hoarse, but his words were clear and cautious. Taka listened without answering. He understood that this was not a conversation but a form of education. The transmission of wisdom is not through teaching but through quiet sharing. After Adoke finished speaking, no one answered. The fire crackled and the wind blew. Everyone understood what they were saying. The subsequent silence made one feel fulfilled rather than empty, brimming with the weight of the knowledge passed on. Falke felt that his understanding had changed. Otto CK's words provided a framework for his experiences. The return journey is easier than the outbound one. They were carrying heavy logs, but now they knew the way and their bodies were at rest. Take walked with a firm determination. His mind was calm and his goal was clear. When they finally saw the familiar valley cliffs towering in the distance, he felt a peaceful relief. To be precise, it's not joy, but rather the right feeling of returning to where one belongs. This group of people welcomed them back without any ceremony. People shared food and stored wood, and life returned to its normal pattern. But during this trip, some changes took place in Taka. He came to understand the value of preparation, the value of patience, and the value of creating warmth in places where there is no warmth. He realized that survival does not depend on heroic actions, but on continuous efforts, doing necessary things day after day, without complaint or without expecting anything in return. He already knew that he could endure more than he had imagined, and his body could be pushed far beyond its limits. In the following weeks, Taka found himself taking on more responsibilities in the team. On long nights, he took care of an old man who began to cough, brought him warm food, tidied up his fur, and sat beside him when he was coughing so hard that he couldn't see. L's name is No View. He was once a great hunter, but age and injuries have turned him into such a weak figure, standing by the fire, waiting for the spring that may never come. His breathing was very difficult, crunching in his chest. Sometimes he coughed very hard, with blood all over his lips. Take has no resentment towards this responsibility. For many winters, No View had been keeping this group of people alive. Now it was Take's turn to do everything in his power to offer help. He also spent time with a younger child, a girl about 8 winters old, teaching her basic fire safety knowledge. He taught her how to identify dry moss, how to scrape off thin rolls of wood that are prone to sticking, and how to blow out embers without scattering the ashes. The girl looked at her seriously, practiced the movements, and occasionally asked some questions, in her small and quiet voice. Taka patiently replied, recalling that he had been taught the same thing before and understanding that this knowledge was the most important gift he could pass on. Her name is Lena. Her mother passed away last winter due to childbirth. She was raised by a group of people, just as she did when her parents passed away. One night in the depth of winter, something happened that would accompany Tolkien for the rest of his life. A young hunter, actually a boy, was sent to put out fires for about 15 winters. His name is Kyle. He is eager to prove himself to show that he can be entrusted with important tasks. But Kyle was also exhausted from a whole day of hunting. At the darkest hour of the night, he fell asleep. The fire went out. The coal went out. The coldness has completely entered. It crawled in like a living thing, invading every corner of the shelter and seeping into the animals' skins and furs. Taka was awakened by a bone-minus chilling cold, which was even more intense than usual, seemingly penetrating all the fur and animal skins. He sat up and immediately found the fire had gone out. Where there should have been flames, only cold ashes remained. Around him, others also began to wake up and realize the same mistake. Carl was curled up with a dead fire pit, still sleeping, not knowing what had happened. Panic is instantaneous and thorough. The surge of adrenaline brought Taka completely awake. In the depth of winter, a pile of dead fire means death to everyone. Promptly, he shook Carl awake, his tone stern. It was the first time someone had heard him raise his voice. He opened his eyes wide in confusion. When he saw the extinguished flame, his eyes widened in terror. His face turned pale and he began to tremble, not because of the cold but because of fear. They worked together to bring it back to life to be on the safe side. Taka put the embers in another small pit, which he had learned from Otto K. They carefully moved them to the main fire pit, fed them with the driest moss, blew on them until their lungs ached, and gradually reignited a tiny flame. He worked patiently for nearly an hour, but eventually the fire returned, turning from a spark into a glow and then into a true flame. Taka's hands trembled while he was working, partly because of the cold and partly because he was too focused. Every breath should be precisely measured and every refueling should be carefully timed. The crisis passed and the shelter gradually regained its warmth. But this incident shocked everyone. They all understand how close they are to life and death and how small the gap between them is. The extinguished fire revealed their fragility and reminded them that survival was not guaranteed. Kai was crushed by his failure. He sat beside others with his head in his hands, and no one spoke to him. It wasn't because he was angry, but because he had nothing to say. He made a mistake and almost everyone paid the price for it. This is the reality of their existence. But the next morning, Taka walked up to Kel and sat beside him. He offered no comfort or guarantee. On the contrary, he shared his own story once. He failed to set the trap properly and lost a meal that would have been very easy to get. He mentioned that failure is part of learning, and it is important to remember that the fear of making the same mistake again keeps you on your guard. Hal listened, his expressions softened. He nodded slowly, realizing that he hadn't been kicked out and that he would still have a chance. Taka also told him about the spare embers and showed him the spare fire pit, where they could keep a small number of spare fires at any time. This is a technology that not everyone is aware of, a piece of knowledge that might save lives one day. Winter continues to advance slowly and coldly. Days pass naturally, and only small events can distinguish them. A successful hunt, a broken sky in need of repair, a story shared with fire. Life maintains its own pace. The same tasks are repeated endlessly, and the same challenges are constantly faced and dealt with. But in this repetition there are also some quiet moments, a glance with Sarah, a word of praise from Nuff, and scenes where the young girl successfully lit a fire on her own. These moments may not be considered happy, but they can be regarded as happy. They prove that life is not merely about survival. Even under the most difficult conditions, humans can create small connections and purposes. Taka began to understand that the significance did not lie in grand postures or extraordinary achievements, but in these meticulous and capable small and repetitive actions. He was very satisfied because he knew that the fire would not go out. The tools would be very sharp, and the children would learn what they needed to know. One particularly cold night, Sarah moved closer to him and sat by the stove. They sat there amicably and silently for a long time. Then, without even glancing at him, she placed a small package in his hand. Inside were the ropes she had woven, complex and sturdy, dyed with plant pigments, showing patterns of darkness and light. This is a kind of beauty that has nothing to do with survival. Beauty is merely because beauty itself is a resistance to the cold. Then at her, and nodded in gratitude. He tied the rope to his wrist, which would remain there for the next few years, a small connection mark. Winter has finally begun to relax and the days are gradually getting longer. One morning, Tucker went out and saw signs of change. The texture of the snow has changed, becoming softer and starting to tighten under its own weight. Although the sun is still very weak, its light has taken on different properties. Birds that had not shown up throughout the winter began to reappear, their calls sharp and clear in the cold air. This group of people began to prepare for spring, checking their tools, discussing which direction they would follow the migrating herd, and planning their journey in advance. Lunch does not refresh you. They feel that they have survived another winter and will soon obtain more accessible resources. The conversation turned to which valleys are best for grazing, where the water is most abundant, and what kind of routes are safest for travel. These decisions affected the following months, and everyone contributed their observations and memories. Take participated in these preparations with his usual composure and calmness. He sharpened the tip of his spear, repaired his travel gear and helped store the food needed for the journey. He failed to take into account the greater arc of his life, nor did he consider whether he would witness more or fewer winters. He was just focused on the matter at hand, on the tasks that needed to be completed immediately. But sometimes in quiet moments, he would feel a sense of wonder about his own existence. He had lived for so long, and he had found useful ways. He had established connections with others, making life bearable. This thought he couldn't express in words, but it was right there, in a warm center of his chest. One night, as the sun was setting in the western sky, Tok-A stood outside the shelter, gazing at the valley. Small open areas began to appear in the river below, and the ice in some places started to break. For the first time in several months, the sound of flowing water was heard. He thought of all those standing in similar places, looking at similar signs of spring and feeling the same cautious hope. He recalled all the winters in the past and all the winters to come. His life was just a small part of that endless cycle, a brief moment in the long story of survival. But this is his moment, his life. He did his best to survive. He kept the fire burning. He has taught children. He has taken care of the elderly. He made the tools on which human beings depend for survival. His life was neither glorious nor extraordinary. But this is already enough. This is exactly what humans do. They endured it. They help each other. They moved forward quietly in the cold until the warmth returned. The wind rose slightly, carrying a hint of warmth, indicating the approach of change. Tucker closed his eyes, allowing this sentence to seep through his heart. This messenger from a kinder world. Tucker turned and went back into the room, back to the fireplace, surrounded by those familiar faces. The night ahead will be very cold, just like all nights, but it will pass. As usual, morning would always come, and he would wake up as usual and start anew. Deep within the earth, beneath layers of permafrost and compressed snow, there are places where humans once lived. These places have been preserved by the cold, retaining the traces of life's flickering and fading thousands of years ago. Archaeologists sometimes find shallow depressions, stone circles and stains on the soil that has been burned in the landscape. When they carefully and gently brushed away the soil, they discovered fragments of a world that had already vanished. What do these fragments tell us? Less than we hoped, more than we expected. They speak an absent language, talking about what once existed, but now only the remaining things hint at them. The scattered flint chips around a special stone indicate that someone has been working there for several hours or days. The patterns of animal bones, which are divided for the bone marrow and which are intact, indicate the determination of food, energy consumption and survival priorities. The circular column holes are filled with black soil, hinting at the building that once stood. The carefully stratified ash deposits indicate that in the same place, fires have occurred year after year and throughout the 4 seasons. But all of these are dry facts and archaeological data. They failed to capture the experiences of life, nor did they capture the human aspects of these lives. For this, we must imagine, in fond dream of traveling back in time to the past. Link about the cave itself. It is not a natural limestone cave, but a space deliberately dug by humans on the hillside or formed with snow, bones and animal skins. This was the earliest building and the first time that humanity made a demand to nature's indifference. Each cave has been reused, modified, abandoned, and sometimes even reused. The same depression on Earth is home to different families and different seasons. Everyone is adding to their own level, new ashes, new broken tools, and new decisions about where to make a fire and where to sleep. Over time, these places accumulate memories in physical form. The Earth itself has become a kind of archive, recording the patterns of human behavior with stains and fragments. But these places also record some other things, some more difficult to explain. The evidence of rituals transcends the behaviors directly necessary for survival. Why did people in the Ice Age paint on the walls of caves deep underground? These places are hard to reach and have no practical significance. Why do they carve small statues from huge ivory, spend hours working, without tools, weapons, direct food or a source of warmth? These questions lead us into a realm where archaeology can only offer hints and can never provide definite answers. We found these things, but their significance gradually faded away like the smoke from ancient fires. As time goes by, the distance between cultural relics and their cultural significance is getting farther and farther. Around the fireplace in the Ice Age shelter, certain objects keep repairing. Holes were drilled in the small stones, parallel lines were engraved on the bones, and there were also pendants made of animal teeth and shells. These items are portable, personal, and can be taken from one place to another, but have no obvious practical functions, scraping or hunting. However, they are elaborately crafted and polished very smoothly during transportation. Sometimes, even if they are broken, they will be repaired. This indicates that their value transcends utilitarianism. For those who make and carry them, they are meaningful, although this meaning is still not very clear to us. Some archaeologists interpret them as symbols of identity, signs belonging to specific groups or families. Others regard them as objects of ritual, things used in practice that we can no longer rebuild. Some people still think they are just beautiful. Even under the harshest conditions, humans need beauty in something that can please the eyes and hands. All these explanations may be correct, or none of them may be, or it could be an entirely different matter. What we can be certain of is that people in the Ice Age did not purely live in a material world with food, fire and shelter. They also lived in a world of symbols, meanings and connections, all of which transcend what is visible at hand. Fire itself is not merely a source of warmth and light. It is also a gathering place in the center of social life organization. The circle around the fire is a place for telling stories and making decisions. Here, this group is not merely a collection of individuals striving to survive. In some shelters, archaeologists discovered carefully arranged evidence, with stones arranged in patterns and spaces divided in different ways, indicating that different areas had different functions. There may be a difference between a sleeping place and a working place, and a place for preparing food and a place for making tools. These spatial divisions imply a kind of social organization and understanding. That is, different activities require different spaces, and even in one room, life has a structure. The act of creating these divisions itself indicates that in an unpredictable world, order and predictability are needed. However, there is also evidence suggesting that some practices seem to be more symbolic and more closely linked to belief systems that we cannot fully understand. In some Ice Age sites, animal skulls were found to be arranged in a special way and placed in niches facing specific directions. Doing so requires considerable effort, and its purpose remains mysterious. Are these spoils of war a celebration of a successful hunt? Are they offerings to deities, or are they regarded by people as forces that control the activities of animals? Are they merely decorative attempts to make the living space less bare? We don't know. We can only observe this pattern and notice its repeated occurrence at different locations on time periods. Equally mysterious is the rare discovery of man-made burials from the Ice Age. Uncommon. Most of the deceased might have been left at the place where they fell. Their bodies were retrieved from the permafrost without any ceremony. But some people were carefully buried. Their corpses were buried in shallow graves covered with stones or soil, sometimes with tools or ornaments. A famous cemetery was discovered in present-day Russia, where the remains of 2 children lay head to head. Their bodies were covered with tens of thousands of shell beads, which had once decorated their clothes. The time required to make these beads, string them together and sew them onto the clothes. It must be huge. Some people attach great importance to these children and are willing to spend time letting them die with decoration. This is something that transcends survival, a bond of love, responsibility or faith that transcends the struggle of survival. The act of burial itself represents a profound leap in cognition. Understanding death is not merely the end of the animation, but a transformation that needs to be acknowledged. The deceased were not only abandoned but also tended to be abandoned, which indicates that the concept of personality still exists after breathing. Cave paintings might be the most unforgettable evidence of this inner life. In the caves of Ice Age Europe, deep in the passageways without sunlight, people painted the images of animals on the stone walls. They painted horses and bison, mammoths and lions, deer and oxen. They depict them with technique and attention to detail, capturing movement and form in a complex way that still impresses modern artists. These paintings need planning. Someone must collect or make pigments, mixing ochre and charcoal with fat or water to make pigments. Someone had to move the lamp deep into the cave. The small stone bowl was filled with animal fat, and the wick flickered in the darkness underground. Some people have to stand in the dark, holding a lamp, perhaps for several hours while another person is painting. This is not an easy job. This is well miners considered, purposeful and important enough to justify the need for considerable effort. But why? What drives those who struggle every day to find food and warmth to go down into the cold and dark caves and paint on the walls that most people in their community will never see? One theory holds that these are hunting grounds where ceremonies are held to ensure the success of the hunt. Drawing the behavior as an animal is a way to gain the power to control it, placing it under human control in the realm of symbolism before facing it in the real world. Another theory holds that caves are sacred spaces where the boundary between the ordinary world and other domains is very narrow. These paintings are messages or prayers, an exchange of forces beyond human comprehension. The third theory holds that these paintings are teaching tools and a way to impart animal knowledge to young hunters, showing them the actions and behaviors of different species. Another viewpoint holds that they are merely art, manifestations of human creativity, and do not require actual proof. All these theories are supported by evidence, but none of them can be proven precisely. Truth may encompass all of these, or it might be something we haven't imagined yet. All we can say is that the people who painted these pictures had time for contemplation and time for practice beyond what is made at hand. They have developed a way of thinking that allows for symbolism representation, and the idea that images can replace reality. The complexity of this kind of cognition is remarkable in itself. This indicates that humans in the Ice Age were not fundamentally different from us in terms of thinking ability, abstraction, imagination, and creative ability. They just used different materials, different challenges, and different limitations. Painting the brains of mammoths on the cave walls is the brain that is now used to design churches and compose symphonies. In similar shelters around similar fires, other practices leave even fewer traces. Consider the possibilities of music. We know that people in the Ice Age made flutes from bird bones. Several were found to have been elaborately carved, with finger holes tuned to specific notes. Someone was sitting by the stove playing these flints, and the sounds they made were wafting in the cold air. How does that music sound? What is its purpose? Perhaps this is a form of entertainment, a way to pass the long and dark hours. Perhaps this is a kind of ritual, accompanied by one that we cannot recreate. Perhaps this is a form of communication, a signal conveyed to other groups. Perhaps this is merely a kind of beauty, which reminds people that what humans need is not just survival, they need moments to transcend and to establish connections with things beyond the material world. We also discovered bone whistles, and possibly drums, hollowed minus out logs or stretched animal skins, all of which can produce rhythmic sounds. Music may be a part of life, accompanying work and rest, marking important moments, and connecting a group of people through a shared rhythm, but the sound itself vanished, vanishing into time. We only have silent instruments and silent witnesses which will never be heard again. The human voice must have played a central role in life during the Ice Age, in a way that is almost impossible for us to reconstruct. Language has fully developed. Anatomical evidence clearly illustrates this point. With the advent of language, complex communication became possible. People can warn each other of dangers, coordinate hunting strategies, and share knowledge about which plants are edible and which are poisonous. But language also contributes to some more subtle and perhaps more important things. The ability to share one's inner state not only enables the exchange of facts, but also feelings, intentions, and memories. Similarly, we can infer but cannot prove the existence of oral traditions. Every human culture we know has stories passed down from generation to generation, narratives, explanations of its origin, compilations of values, and preservation of knowledge. People in the Ice Age almost certainly had such stories. At night, around the fire, sounds rose and fell, telling the stories of animals and their ancestors, the unforgettable hunts and the harsh winters spent, as well as the places, people, and events. These stories undergo slight changes each time they are told, adapting to new environments and shaped by the storyteller's skills and the audience's reactions. They are constantly evolving creatures. The collective memory of this group is encoded in the form of narratives rather than written texts, but they leave no trace. When the last speaker passed away, the story came to an end. We can imagine them, but we can never restore them. Some researchers believe that dreams played an important role in Ice Age cultures. In many traditional societies, dreams were regarded as a source of knowledge or a connection with the spiritual realm. Perhaps people in the Ice Age also valued their dreams, discussing them by the fireplace and seeking meaning in the images that appeared in their sleep. The long night is conducive to a rich and dreamy life. In the semi-awake state between sleep and wakefulness, the mind roams freely. In the darkness wrapped in fur, listening to the sounds of the fire and the wind, the boundary between wakefulness and sleep can permeate. Dreams can be as real as waking experiences, especially when they recur or when many people report similar images. If this group believes that dreams offer a way to communicate with hidden knowledge, or with animal souls or deceased ancestors, then the world of dreams would be a parallel landscape, as important as the material world they pass through during the day. However, we are still guessing. Dreams leave no tangible marks. We will never know what dreams the people of the Ice Age had or what these dreams meant to them. What we know is that over time, these shelters themselves have accumulated layers of meaning. A specific cave might have been used for 5 years, then abandoned by a generation, and then reoccupied by another group of people who discovered the same practical advantages that their predecessors had already recognized. Every profession has left its mark. New dust layers, discarded or lost new tools, and new modifications to the structure. Over the centuries, these layers have gradually formed, creating a depth of time. When archaeologists excavate such sites, they strip away time itself, revealing one professional layer after another, each a window to a different moment in the past. The deepest strata are the oldest, sometimes dating back 15,000 or 20,000 years. The topmost rock layer was formed recently and might only be 10,000 years old. Between these two lies all the forgotten moments, All the fires that were lit and then extinguished, all the cooked and eaten meals, and all the nights that survived. Proper excavation of these sites requires great patience. Each layer must be recorded. Every cultural relic is catalogued and every sample is collected for analysis. The work was carried out slowly, carefully removing the soil grain by grain with small tools and brushes. This is a hard labor, and its motivation is the desire to restore some fragments of the truth about how people live. However, even after the most meticulous excavation, most of what happened was lost. Organic matter decays, animal skins, wood and grease decay, leaving only stones and bones. A brief activity leaves no trace. Dialogues, gestures, songs, emotions minus all the textures of daily life have completely vanished. All that remains for us are shadows, outlines and the simplest hints. It was once a complete and complex existence. This is the fundamental limitation of archaeology. It can tell us about material culture, what tools people make, what animals they hunt, and how they build their dwellings. It can sometimes imply their behavioral patterns, where they like to sleep, how they organize their space, and what they think is worth keeping or burying. But it cannot give us the inner life, the subjective experience, and the meaning that people themselves give to their actions. For this reason, we must use our imagination, guided by our understanding of human nature, constrained by physical evidence, but not entirely determined by it. We must recognize that people in the Ice Age were complete human beings and had the same thinking and feeling abilities as us. They have loved and feared, hoped and grieved, grown tired and amazed, experienced both beautiful moments and moments of despair. Their brains are as complex as ours, their emotions as rich as ours, and their consciousness as vivid as ours. But the specific structure of their consciousness and the special way they understand the world remain ultimately unknowable. We can approach it, approximate it, but we cannot fully restore it. This has created a productive mystery at the core of Ice Age archaeology. What we know is fascinating enough, but not satisfying enough. Each answer will generate new questions. Each excavation reveals new puzzles. The past is no longer a closed book, but a continuous dialogue, a dialogue between the remaining fragments and the explanations we have constructed. In this conversation, we begin to understand some important things about human existence itself. We can see that the struggle for survival, no matter how cruel it may be, is never a pure material struggle. What human beings need is not merely food and warmth. They need beauty, need meaning, need connection, and need to transcend. They need to prove their existence in this world, create something that lasts longer than their own lives, and pursue something beyond the present. People in the Ice Age carved small statues, painted caves and made music. They were also engaged in the same basic human engineering. In the face of indifference, they adhere to their humanity and create something meaningful in a world without an inner purpose. Their shelter is not only a physical structure but also a psychological one. Here, human values can thrive. Here, groups can maintain their identities and cohesion. And here, the fine threads of culture could be preserved and passed on. These spaces do not merely represent the protection of elements. They are the stages where human dramas are staged. Today, as we stand among the ruins of these shelters, as we hold the tools they made or study the images they drew, we are connecting across vast distances. The life we come into contact with, no matter how short it is completely different from our own life, but in essence it is similar. We are reminded that we are part of a long bloodline, a chain of survival and creativity that extends through countless generations. Every innovation, language, art, social organization and technological development that we take for granted originated from the cold refuge of the Ice Age. Every person alive today is a descendant of an Ice Age survivor who endured the cold nights and entered a warm era. Their resilience is encoded in our DNA. Their innovations are preserved in our cultural memory. We are their legacy, proving that their efforts have not been in vain. Perhaps this is the most mysterious place. It's not about what people in the Ice Age believed, felt or dreamed of, but how they managed to persevere and how they maintained hope and purpose in an environment that should have destroyed them. I know that warmth is always temporary and coldness will always return. How do they find the strength to go on day after day, winter after winter? The answer partly lies in the social bonds they form. This network of mutual obligations and support keeps individuals from facing the cold alone. But it must also exist within some endurance that humans possess. Even in the midst of difficulties, one can find the meaning of life. People in the Ice Age had no choice but to give up. There is nowhere else to go, no rescue, and no easier way to take. They could only go on. They did just that. In discontinuation, and this quiet and persistent refusal to surrender, they have opened up space for the development of human culture, the prosperity of language, art and technology. Coldness has always been there, but so is fire, and so are the people gathered around it. They share warmth, food and stories, and together they create something greater than any individual life. That scene, the circle surrounded by fire, the faces illuminated by the flickering flames, and the gentle sounds ringing in the darkness, perhaps is the most authentic picture of life in the Ice Age that we can form. Not heroic or dramatic, but full of humanity. It is not to answer our questions, but to invite us to imagine, to be curious, and to feel a certain connection that spans 1,000 years. We can never know exactly how they lived, but we can remember them by acknowledging their humanity and by understanding how they faced their world with courage and creativity, cooperation and care. We can discover the same potential within ourselves. From the perspective of climate control, seasons will structure life in ice ages in ways that we can hardly understand. Spring brings not only warmth, but also the return of migratory animals, the appearance of plants under the snow and the extension of the day. This is an era of movement, an era of following herds, an era of gathering what the stinging land offers. The short but intense summer is a season rich in resources. Berries ripen, fish swim in the streams, and small animals are still naive towards human predators. Autumn requires preparation. It is necessary to urgently collect and store food to withstand the upcoming cold. Winter means contraction, confinement, spending long nights in shelter, with the only activity being the flickering of flames on the stone walls. Each season has its own rhythm, its own demands, and its own possibilities. The people living in these places have gained a deep understanding of this land and a keen perception of subtle changes, which we have basically lost. They can understand the behavior of animals, predict weather patterns and know which valleys can avoid the worst winds. This is a very difficult piece of knowledge, which was gained at the cost of the lives of those who guessed wrongly and is preserved in the memories of the survivors. The relationship between humans in the Ice Age and the animals they hunted was complex, and we can only partially reconstruct its meaning. Animals are food. Of course, it's the difference between survival and hunger. But they're also dangerous, powerful, and possess qualities that humans admire and even envy. Mammoths were huge and seemingly invincible, that they could be defeated through human intelligence and cooperation. The cave lion is a predator and killer, but it is also elegant, efficient and perfectly adapted to its ecological niche. The murals in the cave imply a sense of reverence, acknowledging that these animals are not merely resources but creatures worthy of attention and respect. The act of hunting itself is full of ritual significance. Preparations may include fasting, isolation, and wearing specific clothing or accessories. Hunting is not only physical but also mental, a confrontation with the mystery of life and death. When an animal falls down, when its blood stains the snow, and when its carcass is slaughtered and shared with people, these are all meaningful moments. Nothing was wasted. Lunch does not refresh. The bones turned into tools and ornaments. The animal skins turned into clothes and coverings. Sinews turned into a line. Animals have been transformed. Their substances have been integrated into human life, and in a sense, their power has been transferred to those who eat them. This complete utilization demonstrates practicality and respect. To commemorate the death of this animal, people must ensure that no part is left idle. However, there are also some animals that are not hunted or are rarely hunted. Some creatures often appear in cave paintings, but rarely in food scraps. For instance, cave lions or long minus-haired rhinos. Are these animals too dangerous to be hunted regularly, or are they sacred, unless in special circumstances they are allowed to live in some way? We have no idea. But this pattern indicates that people in the Ice Age made a distinction. Not all animals occupy the same position in their cosmology. The social structure of Ice Age groups remains a mystery to a large extent. We can infer from the size of the shelter and the pattern of the artifacts that the group is relatively small, possibly consisting of 15 to 30 people, and is a large family bound together by kinship and interdependence. Leadership, if it exists in any formal sense, has left no clear archaeological marks. There is no obvious hierarchical system, no obvious terms of the elite, and no structure indicating centralization. This does not mean that the societies of the Ice Age were equal in any modern sense. It's just that power, if it existed, its expression has not been preserved in archaeological records. Perhaps leadership depends on the situation. The best hunters lead the team when hunting. The most knowledgeable old mans are just at collecting plants. The most persuasive speaker mediates disputes. Perhaps authority stems from age, from experience, from demonstrated skills, rather than from inherited status. Or perhaps we simply lack evidence to see the hierarchy that is obvious to those living in it. It is obvious that cooperation is indispensable. No one could survive alone in the Ice Age. The organization provides warmth through shared body temperature, safety through the number of people, and efficiency through division of labor. Children born in such a group are born in a network composed of obligations and protection. A series of relationships make up their entire lives. Yes, they will learn from their parents, but also from their uncles, aunts and grandparents, if they are lucky enough to live that long. Knowledge is passed down from generation to generation. Everyone is a recipient of accumulated wisdom and the ultimate disseminator. The role of children in Ice Age societies is particularly difficult to reconstruct. We discovered some small tools, sometimes of a size suitable for smaller hands, which indicates that children have been involved in work from an early age. We find that children's funerals indicate that people mourn and commemorate the death of the young. But to a large extent, the structure of childhood, how children play, what they are taught, how they are disciplined, and what kind of freedom they enjoy remain invisible. We can assume that they learn through observation and imitation, observing adults and gradually taking on adult tasks. We can assume that they, like all young mammals, develop skills that play and exploration. However, whether they were spoiled or treated roughly, whether their childhood was short or long, and whether their gender roles were strictly enforced or fluid, these questions remain unresolved. Each answer we put forward reflects our own assumptions as well as any evidence. During the Ice Age, the experience of aging must have been particularly intense. A person who can survive childhood diseases, a person who can avoid fatal accidents in middle age, a person who can escape the danger of childbirth, a person who can escape the danger of hunting, a person who can live until their hair turns white, their teeth wear out and their joints become stiff. They will become repositories of memories and connections with early life. An elderly person who has lived for 50 years may still remember the situation from decades ago, may have witnessed rare events, a particularly harsh winter, an unusual animal migration, and the arrival of strangers from distant regions. Their existence will be valued and their knowledge will be sought. But they will also become increasingly vulnerable, make less and less physical contributions, and rely more on others' care. When there is an abundance of food, this may not cause a problem. However, when resources are scarce, difficult decisions may be necessary, such as whether this group can afford those who cannot keep up with the pace, and how to allocate resources when they are not enough for everyone. We have found evidence that some people survived with serious injuries or disabilities. A person with shriveled arms who lives to old age. The bones of a woman indicated that she was unable to chew her own food in the last few years of her life. Someone fed her, took care of her and made sure she survived, although she couldn't contribute in the traditional way. This shows sympathy for social bonds that are strong enough to support disadvantaged groups. But we also know that not everyone has received such care. In many of the ruins there are no elderly people, which indicates that death often comes before old age, or those who cannot keep up with the times are left behind. The scenery itself was the text that people constantly read during the Ice Age, a source of information and meaning. Hills and valleys are not only geographical features but also places of historical connection and practical significance. This valley might be the place where deer gather in spring. That hillside might be the best flint for making tools. This cave may be famous for its paintings, but we can only guess the purpose for which it is occasionally visited. This land is not depicted on paper in digital form, but in memory and oral traditions. Each feature is named and described. Traveling in the scenery is moving in the web of meaning. Every landmark evokes memories and associations. Rivers and streams are particularly important. Water sources, of course, as well as travel routes, boundaries between territories, gathering places for animals, and thus also gathering places for hunters. A good fishing spot may be visited year after year and generation after generation, becoming a place where fragments accumulated from human activities pile up and countless food bones gradually turn into fossils. The night sky must also be very important. Without artificial light, the brightness of stars would be almost beyond our imagination in a world polluted by light. People in the Ice Age would watch the stars spinning above their heads and notice their patterns, which changed with the seasons. Did they tell stories about constellations? Did they see the shapes of animals, ancestors, or mythological figures in the constellations? Do they use stars for navigation, marking time and predicting seasonal changes? We can only assume that they did so. Such an obvious and reliable resource would not be ignored. The moon will also always exist. Its phases mark the passage of time, and its light makes traveling on a clear night possible. That apart from its practical uses, the moon may also have symbolic meanings. It follows a regular pattern from the new moon to the full moon and then back to the full moon, echoing the natural cycle of growth and decline. Its pale light might be regarded as different from sunlight. Mysterious and latent power. The weather is both an enemy and an ally. A clear and cold night may mean dangerous temperatures, but it also allows for stargazing and conversations under the campfire that last until late at night. A snowstorm may trap people in shelters for several days, forcing them to get closer to each other and causing a shortage of food supplies. Wind can make hunting impossible, or it can be used to drive animals closer to waiting hunters. Rare rainfall in frozen areas may be a harbinger of global warming and a sign of seasonal changes. Every weather pattern will be recorded, interpreted and remembered. Knowledge is crucial for survival. Building a shelter requires a detailed understanding of the materials and their properties. Which stones can retain the heat of a flame and still emit warmth long after the flame is extinguished? Which branches will bend without breaking and be useful for the frame? How can we seal the gaps so that no wind can blow in while allowing smoke to escape? People in the Ice Age, through countless attempts and failures, worked out complex solutions. In extremely cold weather, a well-built shelter can be the difference between life and death, and the knowledge of how to build a shelter is precious, carefully passed on from experienced builders to those who learn this craft. In these shelters, the arrangement of spaces will follow practical and cultural patterns. The fire that has always been in the center will always be taken care of. If the conditions make it difficult to reignite, allowing it to go out could be disastrous. People gathered around the fire and arranged their positions according to custom. Perhaps the elderly are closer together, perhaps men and women are in different places, perhaps families are at designated locations. These arrangements are fluid but meaningful, expressing social relationships and spatial positioning. The tools made by people are an extension of human capabilities and a method of applying force or achieving precision that cannot be reached by hand. The sharp flint blade can cut through the animal's skin that fingers can only clumsily tear. The spear can be extended further, allowing hunters to attack from a safer distance. An needle carved from bone and polished smooth to be used to connect pieces of animal skin with fine stitches, thus creating plus-minus fitting clothing that retains heat. Each tool represents accumulated knowledge, Understanding which stones can be expected to peel off, which strike angle will produce the sharpest edge, and how much force should be applied to prevent the stone from breaking. The manufacturers have developed a sensitivity to materials, a tactile intelligence, which enables them to sense and predict the reactions of stones through them. Substandard components will be scattered in the workshop area, stones will crack and break in the final stage. These failures are part of the learning process. Everyone teaches what not to do and improves the technology through mistakes and corrections. The most skilled toolmakers may be recognized for their abilities, their work sought after, and their knowledge valued. A very fine blade, completely symmetrical, with a sharp entire edge, might be regarded as a treasure, traded and preserved until ground into pieces. Preparing food will become a daily ritual, transforming raw materials into food. The meat is cut into several pieces as needed or according to custom. Perhaps the hunter got a larger share. Perhaps it was reserved for those who couldn't hunt. Fat is precious because of its concentrated calories and thus is carefully preserved. Organs will be consumed quickly and their rich nutrition will be valued. Bones are divided into bone marrow, and every calorie is extracted. If there are plant miners-based foods, they can be used as a supplement to meat. Tree roots are dug out from the frozen soil, nuts are taken from the fruits collected in autumn, and berries are dried and stored. Which plants are edible and which parts are good at what time is crucial and complex knowledge. Cooking itself changes food, making its afer easier to digest and more delicious. Meat roasted over fire acquires a flavor and texture that raw meat lacks. Some plants can only be eaten after cooking, as their toxins are decomposed by heating. At that time, fire was not merely about warmth, it was also a tool for change, a way to transform the world to better meet human needs. Around the fire and the warmth and light it provides, social life will unfold. Share their experiences of the day and discuss plans for tomorrow. Elders might tell stories of the past and teach children through narration. Hunters may describe the signs they see, explain races and behaviors. Children will listen, absorb knowledge and learn oral traditions, which is their only connection with history. At these moments this group has renewed itself, affirmed its cohesion and carried forward the culture it has accumulated. There must have been a conflict. Disputes over resource allocation, differences in strategy, and personal tensions exacerbated by close contact. How these conflicts were resolved remains a mystery. Is there any formal mediation? Are some people regarded as peacemakers? Should a decision be made through consensus and continue the discussion until an agreement is reached? Or is it that the strongest merely impose their own will on others? Resolve disputes by force or by threat of force. Different groups may develop different strategies, each of which is functional enough to keep them alive, but they differ in details. The boundaries between groups will be real and permeable. Adjacent tribes may view each other with suspicion and compete for the same resources, but they may also live in peace, trade goods, share information and form alliances through marriage. A young woman or man may leave their birth group and join another group, bringing in new genetic material, new knowledge and new perspectives. These exchanges, no matter how accidental they are, can avoid complete isolation and maintain the connection of the entire landscape. Ideas can disseminate a new tool design, a better hunting technique, and an understanding of production clusters. Genetics of modern populations indicates that people in the Ice Age were not completely separated. Giant flows occurred in different regions, preventing the kind of differentiation that might have happened. This means that the contact between ethnic groups, although not frequent, may be hundreds of kilometers apart. Perhaps the gathering takes place at a specific time. When resources are abundant, multiple bands come together. Such gatherings offer opportunities for various exchanges, including material products, information, stories, and genes. They may be occasions for ceremonies, collective ceremonies that enhance broader identity recognition beyond individual groups. But there is very little evidence of such gatherings, and we can basically only rely on speculation. The diseases that plagued humans during the Ice Age remain largely unknown. Sometimes bones show signs of infection, poor healing, arthritis and other degenerative diseases. However, soft tissue diseases, those that affect organs, blood and nerves, leave no trace at all. We can assume that people suffer from parasites, digestive system diseases, and respiratory infections aggravated by colds. Childbirth is dangerous for both the mother and the baby. Falls, burns, and animal attacks are very common. Without modern medicine, even a minor wound could become a life-threatening infection. For many people, pain is an eternal companion, perhaps treated with herbs that we can no longer recognize, enduring purely out of necessity. However, people survived, adapted to the environment, and carried on. Facts have proved that the human body has astonishing elasticity and can heal from seemingly fatal injuries. The constantly challenged immune system has become robust. Those adults have survived countless potential killers, and their physical condition has been proven by the trial. Within this framework of hardship and danger, there must have also been moments of joy. A successful hunt brought abundance. The child's first sentence. The return of spring. A particularly beautiful sunset painted the snow in the color of fire. Little happiness. The taste of fat. The warmth of fur. Laughter by the fire. These moments will not be recorded, preserved, or passed down for thousands of years. They will flicker and disappear like flames. But they are real. Just as cold and hunger are real, and just as any material product, they warp out of life during the Ice Age. We will never know the names by which people in the Ice Age called each other, what words they used to refer to common objects, or the grammatical structure of their language. Language has left no fossils, no artifacts, and no lasting remnants. They only exist at the moment of speaking, in the vibration of the air between the speaker and the listener. When the last person who spoke Ice Age languages passed away, the entire language world vanished completely, not even leaving an echo. However, we know that their language is complex and expressive because humans with modern anatomy have modern brains, and modern brains instinctively produce language. The ability to grammar, the ability to vocabulary, and the ability to subtly adjust meaning through tone and context minus all of these exist. Ice Age. People can communicate abstract concepts, describe things that do not happen immediately, plan for the future, remember the past. Language might be their greatest tool, more important than any tangible artifact, enabling cooperation and cultural dissemination to reach a scale that would have been impossible without language. The end of the Ice Age, when it finally arrived, was gradual. The temperature is rising slowly. Here the trees retreated. Landscape renovation. Animals adapt, migrate to new regions, or evolve to adapt to the constantly changing environment. Humans have also adapted. Their shelters and strategies are all changing to adapt to the new reality. The technology that helped them get through the cold has been improved and applied to new challenges. Some knowledge has been preserved and brought to a warmer era. Other knowledge becomes outdated, no longer needed, and is gradually forgotten. However, the continuous thread has still not been broken. In the circle surrounded by fire, not every position is equal. The subtle differences in social status determine where you sleep, what you eat, and how others talk to you. These differences are not remarkable. The society of the Ice Age did not have a hierarchical system like that of later civilizations. There were no kings or slaves, no strict class system, and no formal power institutions. However, there are still differences in the roles an individual plays in maintaining the survival of a group based on skills, age, mental authority, and others. Think of those skilled toolmakers. Their stone tips fly very accurately, their blades are sharp, and their scrapers can effectively process animal skins. The value of this person is reflected in specific and measurable aspects. Their work ensures the food, clothing, housing, and transportation of others. Realizing this, they might sleep in warm places close to the center of the fire. They might gain more fat to ensure they have the energy to continue their precise work. These advantages are small and easily overlooked, but over time, they accumulate and form real differences in terms of comfort and survival prospects. Similarly, the most successful hunters, those who possess the magical abilities of tracking animals, predicting their movements, and accurately placing spears, had informal authority. Their skills are directly transformed into the food of the group, and food has always been the top priority. When such hunters talk about where to travel or which animals to hunt, others will listen. When they express their preferences for sleep arrangements or food distribution, their wishes carry weight. Similarly, this is not carried out through violence or a formal power structure. People merely recognize that this is a natural difference in performance ability. The elderly have their own status, although it is fragile and depends on whether they have the ability to continue to play a role. An elderly person whose body can no longer contribute can still offer knowledge, memories of past harsh winters and how they survived, an understanding of distant landscapes and where resources can be found, as well as wisdom about group dynamics and conflict resolution. As long as this knowledge remains valuable, the old man will be taken care of, pressed in the warmest fur, given the most nutritious broth, and spared from the worst suffering. However, if they degenerate to the point of being completely dependent on others, if their minds become dull, or if their bodies become too burdened to move, their status will be eroded. They may still be cared for out of emotion or responsibility, but the quality of such care will entirely depend on the resources and generosity of the group. Sometimes tough decisions are made. Perhaps the most interesting form of elevating one's status belongs to those we can call shamans, who act as intermediaries between the ordinary world and any spiritual dimension they know. These people claim to travel in their dreams, communicate with animal souls, and interpret omens and signs. It doesn't matter whether their propositions are based on sincerity or strategic considerations. What matters is that others believe in them, or at least think their actions are useful. The role of the shaman provides what the team needs: a way to make randomness meaningful, a source of comfort in uncertainty, and a ritual framework for important activities such as hunting and seasonal sports. In return for these services, shamans received special treatment. They often sleep in the most protected places, not necessarily the closest to the fire, but in the places with the best insulation, where the penetrating wind is the least and the roof is the safest. They wore more exquisite clothes than others, decorated with beads, shells and carved bones, marking their special status. These decorations have a dual purpose. They symbolize the role of shamans, making them immediately recognizable. They create a visual focus in the ceremony, allowing the team to concentrate. Creating such decoration requires considerable effort. Some people can only drill holes in shells or bones with sharp stone tools, and this process requires several hours of patient work. Someone must collect or trade materials that might come from far away. Some of the shells discovered at the Ice Age site originated from the ocean hundreds of miles away. The fact that such efforts are spent on non-miners practical items demonstrates the significance of the shaman role. This group of people invest their resources in their spiritual experts because they believe that investment will pay off: successful hunting, safe travel, and protection from misfortune. At the evening gathering, the shaman might perform a ritual before everyone goes to sleep. These rituals vary, but they usually all involve smoking. The fragrant smoke produced by the burning of certain plants or trees fills the refuge. Shamans move in the smoke, and the rhythm of the chanting or humming seems to come from somewhere outside their normal consciousness. Others would watch, mesmerized by the strange sounds coming from the darkness as the flickering flames streaked across the shaman-minus decorated clothes. The ceremony creates a transition, the boundary between the active day and the fragile night. It offers a psychological comfort, a sense that the group has taken measures to protect itself from invisible dangers. It doesn't matter whether these dangers are real or imagined. Rituals work because people believe they do, and faith itself is powerful. After the ceremony, the shamans will settle down at the place where they sleep, and usually there will be others to help. Someone might offer them warm food, or adjust their fur, or check if they are comfortable. This kind of attention not only reflects respect, but also self-interest. A healthy and resting shaman is more effective in their role and can better provide the spiritual services that the team needs. At the darkest hour of the night, if someone wakes up in fear or confusion, they might look towards where the shaman is sleeping and find comfort in their presence. Shamans are believed to be more resistant to mental dangers and better at handling the uncertain boundary between wakefulness and dreaming. Knowing they were there unsleeping soundly indicates that there was no direct threat this night. Shamans cultivate an air of calm authority and never express fear or uncertainty in a way that others can observe. This emotional control is part of their role and as important as any ritual performance. They must appear confident, connected with forces that ordinary people cannot understand, and remain safe in a special relationship with the intangible world. In some groups, shamans claim that they see visions during sleep, predict the movement of animals, warn of impending storms, tell them where they might find lost tools, or which direction the team should travel. The accuracy of these predictions varies, but when they are proven to be correct, the status of shamans is strengthened. When they are proved to be wrong, explanations can be given. These souls are testing this group, either violating taboos or having their information misunderstood. This system has built minus inflexibility to protect the position of the shaman, even when the outcome is unfavorable. Pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers are another group of people who are protected. Their survival is crucial to the continuation of the group, so they receive special care. They sleep in places that can be easily moved when necessary. If they have to quickly leave their physical functions or take care of a crying baby, they won't be trapped there. They can have priority access to the most nutritious food, bone marrow, organ meat and fat parts to support milk production and fetal development. Their cows are maintained, cleaned and mended by others because they themselves don't have that much time and energy to do these things. When traveling in groups, pregnant women and new mothers are given a lighter load, and their speed is adjusted to accommodate the slower movement. These arrangements are not purely out of altruism. This organization needs children to survive in the long term. Supporting mothers is an investment in the future. But there may also be genuine concern, recognizing that pregnant and early mothers are in a vulnerable state and deserve support from the community. Some people's children, especially those of shamans or highly skilled hunters, may also receive slightly better treatment. They will sleep beside their parents in the warmest place, inherit better clothes and tools, and receive more patient education. Over time, these small advantages may combine to form an informal status spectrum passed down from generation to generation. A child who grows up with a good diet and a good education is more likely to develop valuable skills and become a successful hunter or a skilled artisan, thereby passing all similar advantages to their own children. But these differences should not be exaggerated. Even the most beloved people will face the same basic coldness, the same basic danger, and the same ultimate weakness. When the real harsh winter comes, when food and fuel are exhausted, status loses its meaning. The decorative clothes of a shaman cannot be eaten. Skilled hunters use fine tools, but fail to generate heat. Everyone suffers together, and everyone can eye together. In some archaeological sites, entire groups seem to have become extinct. The discovery of tools and personal items still inside the abandoned shelter indicates that the occupants left in a hurry or might not have left at all. At such moments, all differences in status become irrelevant. What matters is only the binary state of survival or death, warm enough or too cold. The perception that privilege is fragile and protection is limited must have influenced how people experience and express their status. Those who have an advantage should not be too obviously superior to others, nor should they be too aggressive. Teamwork is essential for everyone's survival. Alienating others through arrogance or excessive self-minus interest will backfire. Similarly, those with fewer advantages should not hold too much resentment either. The success of a skilled hunter means that everyone has meat to eat, not just the hunter himself. The rituals of shamans, whether effective or not, offer truly shared psychological benefits. This system is effective because it strikes a balance between individual cognition and collective needs. Status brings real benefits, but it also brings responsibilities. People expect shamans to perform rituals even when they are exhausted, to interpret dreams even when they have no dreams, and to show confidence even when they are uncertain. Skilled hunters are expected to share their prey and teach young hunters by setting an example rather than simply giving orders. Elders are expected to offer wisdom, mediate disputes and gracefully endure their own decline. Of course, these expectations are not always met, and those in the Ice Age were no exception. However, The social pressure to fulfill an individual's role must be considerable, enforced through subtle sanctions, slight indifference in interactions, a smaller share allocated, and less assistance provided when needed. In the confined space of the winter shelter, everyone can often be seen by others, and this kind of sanction will be strongly felt. In the evening, those of high status, lying in warmer and more comfortable places, may feel both grateful and burdened. They have advantages, yes, but they also have expectations to meet, roles to fulfill, and performances to maintain. They can't simply sleep. Their sleep patterns must be able to consolidate their positions, meet the needs of the team, and prove that the resources invested in them are reasonable. A shaman who is sleeping poorly, tossing and turning, and muttering to himself in pain, they see their authority being eroded. For those who claim to have a spiritual connection, dreams should be easily realized. A hunter who lies down and doesn't sleep is obviously anxious about the next day's hunt and might lose others' confidence in him. A successful hunter should sleep like a confident person and wake up refreshed and ready. These are not formal rules but implicit expectations. The social logic of a world where survival depends on trust and cooperation. As dawn broke, the shelter gradually awoke. The hierarchy was still clearly visible, but rather delicately. The shaman might slowly wake up and stretch lazily, when others have already started walking around to make a fire or prepare food. Skilled hunters may speak first when planning activities for the day, and their voices carry a natural authority. Pregnant women may be provided with their first breakfast, which is a sign of concern that doesn't need to be discussed. These patterns are so deeply rooted and standardized that they feel like natural laws rather than social constructs. Despite this, they were still constructed, established through countless small interactions, strengthened through repetition, and maintained through collective agreements. They can change. An individual's status may rise or fall depending on their performance. The situation may force people to reevaluate who deserves what. But change is slow and requires constantly demonstrating new values or the continuous failure of old expectations. Finally, the status differences in Ice Age societies were real but limited. They can determine whether your nights are a little more comfortable, whether your hunger is a little more severe, and whether your chances of survival in the severe winter are a little better or a little worse. But they cannot free you from the basic conditions shared by all. You are still human, still vulnerable, still dependent on the group, still dependent on fate, still dependent on patiently tending to the fire in the long and cold night. The shaman dressed in decorative clothes was still breathing smoke like the others. The successful hunters still felt the same chill seeping through the walls of the shelter. Protected children still face an extremely dangerous world that is indifferent to human desires. No matter what advantages they have, they are all islands in the ocean of common difficulties, relatively comfortable moments in life defined by striving. Perhaps this common condition has created an equality that is more fundamental than any difference in status. Everyone knows what it feels like to be cold, what hunger means, and what it feels like to lie awake and listen to the wind, wondering if morning will come. In this understanding and this common weakness, there is a connection beyond hierarchy, a recognition that all people ultimately end up in the same situation. Those who sleep well only sleep slightly better. Those who eat a lot only eat a little more. The differences are real, but the similarities are profound. When the fire in the furnace burns very low, the sheltered place gets colder and colder. When the fierce wind howls and night falls, identity becomes meaningless. What matters is the fire itself, the collective effort to keep it burning, and the quiet determination to see another dawn. Tonight we have traveled a long way, traversing 1,000 years to return to a cold and dark world, where there are mammoth-bone shelters and carefully cared flames. We have imagined the heaviness of the winter in the Ice Age, felt the texture of survival, and spent the endless frozen nights minute by minute and hour by hour. We once walked side by side with Tucker, watching him gather firewood and make a fire, watching the shaman perform rituals in the smoggy shelter, and were amazed by the meanings of the cave paintings, which echoed in our ears like whispered questions we couldn't answer. We have witnessed how humans create warmth when there is no warmth, How did they build communities under the harshest conditions? How did they persevere in seemingly unbearable environments? Now, as our journey draws to a close, when you lie in your warm bed or sit in a comfortable chair, perhaps you can feel the vast distance between that world and this one. The coldness that once defined survival has been pushed back and confined outdoors, where we make brief visits and return to warm shelters at any time. The darkness that had lasted for several hours was now broken by the lights that could be seen by simply pressing the switch. For most of us, the hunger of the Ice Age has been replaced by an abundance that ancient humans could hardly have imagined. We have inherited their resilience, intelligence, teamwork, ability, and patience. But we live in a world they can't even imagine. Their warmth is assumed rather than fought for. The food there is bought rather than hunted, and there is no real danger at night there. Think about what they have given us. It's not just about genetic survival, not just that they live long enough to reproduce and pass on DNA, but much more. They have given us the ability to find meaning in difficulties, create beauty in harsh environments, and build communities that transcend personal survival. The small statues they carved, the paintings they painted, and the ceremonies they held all indicate that life does not merely mean immortality. What human beings need is not merely food and warmth. With the same needs and the same motivation, we create, connect, and seek our goals. But compared with them, our situation is particularly comfortable. Perhaps in this contrast there is a lesson, a reminder that the scale of our own difficulties, though real, is completely different from what our ancestors endured. The pressure we feel, the challenges we face, and the coldness we sometimes experience, minus none of these can be compared with the relentless pressure of survival in the Ice Age. This is not to ignore our own struggles, but to place them in the context, remembering that humanity has faced worse situations and persisted. If they could make a fire on a bone-chilling night, if they could raise their children in the mammoth shelter, if they could find moments of beauty and meaning under extremely scarce conditions, then perhaps we could also face challenges with calm courage. Perhaps we can also persist, adapt, support each other, and get through any difficulty. The fire they were looking after never went out. It's not true. It is passed from one group to another, generation to generation. Over the thousands of years when their world was separated from ours, it evolved from bonfires to fireplaces, then to stones, and then to invisible electric fires flowing through wires. But the essence remains the same. The cold away. Drive away the light of darkness, the center where human society gathers. When you lie in the warm bed and gradually fall asleep in the safe shelter, perhaps you can imagine yourself connecting with those who are struggling to fall asleep under even worse conditions as time goes by. They are your ancestors, literally or metaphorically. Their power continues in you. The cold that threatened them is no longer your enemy. The darkness that frightened them has been tamed. The hunger that drove them was satisfied before it even began. You have inherited a more gentle world, one that they have helped create through their persistent survival and the knowledge and skills they have gradually accumulated. You can rest assured tonight, knowing that the long struggle in the ice and snow has been won. That warmth is something you can obtain effortlessly. Sleep will come gently and fearlessly. Let their memories comfort you. These ancient humans were confronted with impossible difficulties, but for some reason, they survived quietly and persistently. Let their resilience remind you of your own patience. Let their creativity inspire you and help you find meaning even in difficult times. Let their stories be quietly told here for centuries, and let you gradually fall into a peaceful sleep. The fire is still burning. The night is no longer dangerous. The cold stays where it should be, outside. You are warned. You are safe. You are the answer they hope for. Prove that their efforts are important. This is a living evidence that perseverance in the face of difficulties will eventually lead to better days. Now they can sleep comfortably, which is beyond their imagination, but they will surely be grateful. When you sleep, know that you are living well and resting well, accepting the warmth they have painstakingly created and preserved as a way to remember them. The Ice Age has come to an end. The long and cold night came to an end. For all mankind, The arrival of morning is meaningful. In the morning light we can finally rest,